The thing that destroys most homes in a winter blackout isn't the cold. It's not the ice either. It happens after the temperature goes back up, and almost nobody preparing for winter storms sees it coming. It is 2 in the morning, and the temperature outside has dropped to -10 degrees Celsius, 14 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside your house, the power has been out for 6 hours. You were still warm under blankets, and you believe you were safe. But somewhere behind your drywall, in a pipe you have never seen, water is turning to ice. It is expanding with a force that steel cannot resist forever. This is not a distant disaster. This is happening right now in homes across the country every single winter. Whatever you think the danger is, it isn't what you think. The real danger is what the cold does to the systems you depend on, quietly, methodically, while you sleep. We are trained to fear summer heat. We watch the news warnings about heat waves. We know the symptoms of heat stroke. We understand that a hot car can kill a child in minutes. But there is a dangerous blind spot in American emergency preparedness, and it is this: winter blackouts are far more destructive to a home than summer blackouts. Not slightly more destructive, dramatically worse, and almost nobody is talking about why. Let us start with the danger, because the danger is immediate and mechanical. When a house loses power in summer heat, the building itself is not fighting you. Heat rises, it can be vented, it can be shaded, and a well-insulated house can coast for days without becoming truly hostile to human life. But when a house loses power in deep cold, the building becomes an active adversary. This is not an exaggeration. This is thermodynamics, and thermodynamics does not negotiate. Here is the misunderstanding almost everyone carries into a winter emergency. People assume that because their house is well insulated, it will hold heat the same way it holds cool air in July. It will not. Heat loss and heat gain are not mirror images of each other. A house is built with layers of insulation designed to slow the transfer of heat outward, but slowing is not stopping, and the greater the difference between inside and outside temperature, the faster that heat bleeds out. At -10 degrees Celsius, 14 degrees Fahrenheit, outside, a typical American home faces a steeper indoor-outdoor temperature gap than it would on a scorching summer day reaching 40 degrees Celsius, 104 degrees Fahrenheit. The gradient is simply steeper. Cold has more pressure behind it, pushing harder against your walls than heat ever does. This is the hidden science that most preparedness content skips entirely. Heat transfer scales with the temperature difference between two environments, a principle engineers call the thermal gradient. In summer, the gap between a comfortable 70 degrees Fahrenheit indoors and a punishing 104 degrees Fahrenheit outdoors is roughly 34 degrees. In a hard winter blackout, the gap between that same 70 degrees indoors and 14 degrees outdoors is 56 degrees. A steeper gradient means faster, more aggressive heat loss, and it means your home's insulation, which was never designed to fight indefinitely, starts losing the battle within hours, not days. The evidence for this is not theoretical. Case studies from major North American ice storms suggest that indoor temperatures in unheated homes can fall to near freezing within 12 to 24 hours during severe cold snaps, even in well-built structures. Compare that to summer blackout studies, where indoor temperatures during heat waves typically rise more slowly and plateau because the sun is not a 24-hour heat source and nighttime cooling provides partial relief. Winter cold has no such mercy. It presses constantly, day and night, without pause. The survival implication here is direct and urgent. If your power goes out in winter, you do not have the luxury of a slow, gradual decline. You are working against a clock that is already ticking faster than you think, and that clock leads directly into the next and most catastrophic failure point in any winter blackout, a failure point that does not exist at all in a summer emergency. This is where the danger escalates from uncomfortable to catastrophic. In a summer power outage, the worst outcomes are usually heat exhaustion, spoiled food, and discomfort. In a winter power outage, you are facing the possibility of your home being destroyed from the inside by water. Most people fixate on freezing itself as the enemy, picturing frost on windows and cold fingers. That is the misunderstanding. The true destroyer is not the freeze, it is the thaw that comes after. Here is the hidden mechanism most homeowners never learn until it happens to them. Water expands by roughly 9% in volume when it freezes solid. Pipes, whether copper, PEX, or older galvanized steel, are rigid structures that cannot accommodate that expansion without stress. As ice forms inside a pipe, pressure builds between the ice blockage and any closed faucet or fixture downstream. That pressure does not need to reach the frozen section to cause a rupture. It often cracks the pipe at a weaker point elsewhere in the line, sometimes feet away from where the actual ice plug formed. This is why plumbers say the freeze rarely causes the visible break. The freeze causes the pressure. The break happens somewhere else entirely. And here is the part that turns a plumbing inconvenience into a full-scale disaster. The pipe does not leak while it is frozen. It leaks after it thaws. This means a family can survive an entire cold snap believing their home came through fine, only to have hidden water damage reveal itself hours or days later, once temperatures rise and the ice inside the wall finally melts. By then, water has already been pouring into insulation, drywall, and subflooring, often unnoticed until ceilings sag or stains spread. Insurance industry data consistently ranks frozen and burst pipes among the leading causes of significant winter property damage claims in the United States, with average claims running into the tens of thousands of dollars per incident. And in severe cases, homes have been rendered temporarily uninhabitable while structural drying and mold remediation take place. This is a category of destruction that simply has no equivalent in a summer blackout. A hot house without air conditioning is miserable and can be dangerous to vulnerable people, but it does not flood itself from within. A cold house without heat can become a demolition project waiting to happen, triggered by nothing more than the return of warmth. This asymmetry is the core reason winter blackouts carry so much more structural risk, and it should reshape how every household thinks about cold weather emergency planning. Once you understand this domino effect, the next logical question becomes obvious. If the home itself becomes the threat, what happens to the tools we normally rely on to fight back against that threat? This brings us to a dangerous assumption baked into modern prepping culture, one that gives people false confidence right when they need real capability the most. Many households have invested in solar panels, portable power stations, and backup battery systems, believing these tools will carry them through any outage, summer or winter, with equal reliability. This is where a serious misunderstanding sets in, because winter does not just make survival harder, it quietly sabotages the very equipment people are counting on. Solar power generation in winter is nowhere near its summer capacity, and the gap is far larger than most people expect. Shorter daylight hours reduce the total window for charging, but the bigger factor is the angle of the sun itself. During winter months across most of the continental United States, the sun sits lower on the horizon, striking solar panels at a steep, inefficient angle instead of the direct overhead exposure summer provides. Combine shorter days with weaker angled light, frequent cloud cover, and the real possibility of snow physically covering the panels, and you can see documented winter solar yields fall by 20 to 60% compared to peak summer output, with even steeper drops in far northern locations under heavy, persistent snow cover. A system that reliably charges your equipment in July may struggle to produce a meaningful trickle of power in January. The battery side of the equation is just as deceptive. Lithium-based portable power stations, the kind marketed heavily to the preparedness community, lose usable capacity in cold temperatures. Battery chemistry itself becomes sluggish in the cold. Chemical reactions inside the cells slow down, and internal resistance increases. This is not a minor derating. Manufacturers and independent testers have documented that lithium battery capacity can drop by 20 to 30% right around freezing, and by as much as half once temperatures fall well below freezing compared to room temperature performance. This means the power bank you tested in your garage last summer, confident it would run your essentials for a full day, might deliver only a fraction of that runtime during an actual winter emergency. This is the part of preparedness culture that deserves honest scrutiny rather than marketing optimism. The evidence here is not speculative. It comes directly from battery manufacturer specification sheets, which routinely list reduced discharge capacity ratings for cold weather operation, and from solar industry production data that tracks seasonal output variance across northern and mid-latitude installations. Fair weather preppers, people who test and calibrate their systems only during comfortable months, are walking into winter emergencies with equipment that quietly underperforms exactly when the stakes are highest. The survival implication is clear. Any energy plan that has not been stress tested in cold, low-light conditions is not actually a winter plan. It is a summer plan wearing a winter costume. And that gap between assumption and reality is precisely where households get caught unprepared. Once your power generation is compromised, a new and unexpected danger emerges, one rooted not in physics, but in human visibility and behavior. Here is a danger that catches even experienced preparedness-minded households off guard, because it has nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with exposure. In preparedness communities, there is a long-standing goal known as staying a gray man, meaning you avoid drawing attention to the fact that you have resources, supplies, or capability that your neighbors lack. In summer, this is relatively achievable. A quiet, closed-up house gives away very little information to a passerby. Winter destroys that anonymity almost instantly, and this is the misunderstanding that trips people up. Most preparedness advice focuses on physical supplies and skips over the simple reality that heat itself is visible. If you are running a wood stove, a propane heater, or any combustion-based heat source during a wide-scale outage, smoke becomes a signal. It rises visibly against a winter sky, and unlike summer haze or dust, cold, clear air makes smoke plumes sharper and easier to trace back to a source. Beyond smoke, there is an even subtler giveaway that most people never consider. Snow melts unevenly on rooftops based on how much heat is escaping from inside a structure. A house with active interior heating will often show bare or thinning patches on its roofline, while neighboring, powerless homes remain uniformly blanketed in white. To anyone scanning a neighborhood from a distance, that pattern is as obvious as a lit sign.
The hidden science behind this involves basic heat signature physics, the same principle that thermal imaging technology exploits, though you do not need any special equipment to observe it with the naked eye during a real outage. Warm air rising through a roof structure transfers enough heat to the underside of shingles to accelerate snowmelt directly above insulation gaps, attic spaces, and ductwork. This is well documented in residential energy audits, where roof melt patterns are actually used by inspectors as a diagnostic tool to identify heat loss and insulation deficiencies. In a grid-down scenario, that same diagnostic pattern becomes a broadcast of your household's status to anyone paying attention. Then there is scent, a factor almost entirely ignored in mainstream preparedness content. Wood smoke carries a distinct, recognizable odor that can travel a surprising distance in cold, still winter air, because cold air is denser and holds scent particles closer to the ground rather than dispersing them upward as warm summer air does. In summer, the absence of a strong heat source means most households blend into the background, their struggles invisible to outsiders. In winter, the very act of survival can become an involuntary announcement, and that changes the calculus for anyone thinking seriously about extended grid-down scenarios. This is not a reason to panic, but it is a reason to plan differently, and that planning leads directly to the practical solutions that actually work.
Given everything we have established, the danger of faster heat loss, the catastrophic risk of the pipe domino effect, the collapse of solar and battery performance, and the exposure created by visible heat signatures, what does an actual, functional winter survival strategy look like? The answer lies in a shift of mindset that many households never make until they are forced to, and that shift is this: stop trying to heat your entire house and start defending a single, small, defensible space instead. This concept, sometimes called a microclimate strategy, is used by wilderness survival instructors and emergency responders alike, and it applies directly to a home losing power. Instead of attempting to keep an entire 2,000 square foot house above freezing, which is often physically impossible without grid power or a whole house generator, you concentrate every available resource into one small room or even a tent structure erected inside your living room. A 4-person camping tent set up indoors around a couch or bed dramatically reduces the volume of air your body heat and any auxiliary heat source needs to warm. This is not a fringe idea. It mirrors the exact principle behind emergency cold weather shelters used in disaster response, where responders intentionally shrink the livable space to concentrate thermal energy rather than dispersing it uselessly into a large, leaking structure. The second pillar of this strategy is passive insulation, and this is where evidence-based, low-cost solutions genuinely outperform expensive gear. Covering windows, which are consistently the single greatest source of heat loss in most homes due to their poor insulating value compared to insulated walls, can be done effectively with layered materials many households already own. Heavy blankets, moving furniture pads, or even bubble wrap pressed against glass create trapped air pockets that dramatically slow conductive heat loss, the same principle that makes double-pane windows more efficient than single-pane. This is documented, testable building science, not folklore. A single layer of trapped air between two surfaces can meaningfully reduce the rate at which warmth escapes through glass, buying precious hours during a prolonged outage. When you combine the microclimate approach with passive insulation, you address the two biggest failure points simultaneously. You reduce the space that needs heating, which lowers your energy demand at exactly the moment your solar and battery capacity is already compromised by winter conditions, and you slow the rate of heat escape through the weakest points in your home's envelope, buying time before pipes reach dangerous freezing thresholds in the areas you can no longer actively heat. This is the layered thinking that separates a household that merely survives a winter blackout from one that suffers catastrophic structural damage on top of it. Step back now and look at the full picture we have built, piece by piece. A steeper thermal gradient that accelerates heat loss faster than most people expect. A plumbing system that turns into a delayed action flood risk the moment temperatures begin to recover. Energy systems that quietly underperform by staggering margins exactly when winter demand is highest, and a physical environment through smoke, scent, and snow melt patterns that strips away the privacy many households assume they will retain during an extended crisis. None of these dangers exist in isolation, they compound. A slower-moving summer emergency gives you time to adapt, to notice mistakes, and to correct course. A winter blackout gives you hours, sometimes less, before small oversights become irreversible structural or medical emergencies. This is the uncomfortable truth buried beneath most surface-level preparedness advice, the kind that treats a winter power outage as simply a colder version of a summer one. It is not. It is a fundamentally different threat profile, governed by different physics, different equipment limitations, and different exposure risks. The households that fare best when the grid goes down in January are not necessarily the ones with the most expensive gear. They are the ones who understood ahead of time that cold does not wait, that pipes do not forgive, that batteries do not perform on paper specifications alone, and that visibility itself can become a liability. Respect the season for what it actually is, an active, physical adversary rather than a passive inconvenience, and you give yourself the only real advantage that matters when the lights go out and the temperature keeps falling. Preparedness is not about owning more, it is about understanding deeply and honestly what you are actually up against before the night the power finally fails.